Violation for loitering near private property. Take it or appeal it. That's what Cynthia Braid, president of our HOA board, said as she shoved the paper into my chest. Her sunglasses hadn't moved an inch since the shot was fired, her teenage son still standing barefoot by the shed, the barrel of his pistol angled toward the dirt. My daughter was trembling behind me, gripping the back of my shirt like it was the only thing holding her to the ground. "It was a warning shot," Cynthia added, almost casually. "We don't tolerate trespassers near our tool storage. It's private land." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "The thermal signature on that muzzle flash still pings back to my server, and it logged the sound pressure at 115 decibels, less than 2 feet from my daughter's head." She blinked. Maris didn't make a sound. Not anymore. If you're watching this, and you're a parent, or ever stood between someone you love and someone who thinks a clipboard makes them invincible, hit subscribe now. This isn't just a story. It's what they tried to cover up before the judge made them freeze, frame it in court. My name is Dorian Vale. I served 16 years in military cyber intelligence, 6 of those as a forensic drone analyst. These days, I run a small civilian surveillance consultancy. I specialize in non-invasive evidence acquisition. I don't escalate. I document. The HOA didn't know that when they issued the violation. They still thought I was just that quiet guy on the edge of Alderwood Crossings. But this isn't about my credentials. This is about Maris, about the rock she sits on every morning before school, about the day she didn't come back inside smiling. The boundary marker, it's just a slab of stone set between 2 pine trees near the lot line. Years ago, my wife made it a ritual with our daughter. Walk to the marker, take a breath, start the day brave. That's where the shot was fired. That's where Jet Braid, the board president's son, pointed a weapon and pulled the trigger because my daughter was sitting on granite that had been there longer than any of us. Maris had just started riding the scooter again. It was part of her healing. After her mother passed, every therapist said movement mattered, consistency, repetition, safe spaces. That's what the boundary marker was for her, until today. The noise came from behind the Braid's tool shed, a crack, sharp, echoing off the trees. Maris froze. Then she dropped the scooter and ran. I didn't see it happen live. I saw it 10 minutes later, on my rooftop lens array. 3 auto-angled drones caught the motion arc, tagged the auditory spike, and recorded the vector. The footage was clean. I've submitted less compelling evidence in federal court, but when I showed it to the HOA, they filed a citation against me for unauthorized surveillance, for aiding in juvenile harassment, for what Cynthia called emotional theater meant to mischaracterize neighborhood events. I wasn't the only one who saw it. A few neighbors opened their doors after the shot. Curtis, our HOA treasurer, stood across the cul-de-sac for a good 20 seconds, staring at the smoke curling up from his friend's son's gun. He didn't say a word, not until now. I folded the violation paper, neatly, slipped it into the side pocket of my jacket, where I keep copies of FAA registration numbers for each of my security drones. The ink wasn't even dry. "Are you filing a response?" Cynthia asked. I nodded. "No, I'm filing something else." We stood there in silence. Jet had already disappeared behind the shed, but his footsteps were still crunching across the pine needles. My daughter was gripping my leg tighter than she ever had. Her breathing was fast, shallow. I didn't say another word. I turned, picked up the scooter with one hand, and wrapped the other around Maris. As we walked back across the lawn, I could hear Cynthia calling after me, saying something about board procedures and appeal dates. But all I could hear was the static buzz of my server finalizing the data sync. 3 heat signatures, 1 muzzle flash, 1 child-sized silhouette bolting for safety. This isn't just an HOA conflict. This is what happens when a neighborhood forgets that its rules don't override a father's right to protect his child. Alderwood Crossings like to pretend it was carved from unity. Colonial mailboxes, mandatory mulch tones, faux rustic signage at the entry gate. The kind of place where every kid rode a bike and every lawn had a flag, until the wrong person asked the wrong question. The morning after the violation, my name was already on the HOA bulletin app. Resident cited for unauthorized perimeter equipment, it said, with no mention of the discharged firearm, not one word about Maris. Just a quiet insinuation that surveillance equals threat. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen the pattern before. 6 months ago, a veteran named Hale Rios got cited for a raised garden bed. They called it an unapproved permanent structure. Hale was growing herbs for his wife's recovery after a stroke. No one cared. He ripped it out after Cynthia Braid threatened to lean. A few weeks after that, a young couple, Noor and Devin, were cited for noise. It was a child's birthday party. Too many cars, they said. Unregistered guest count exceeding capacity. The real issue? The wrong kind of guests. It was their niece's quinceañera. The citation arrived the next day. Now it was my turn. Maris wouldn't go near the front yard. She hadn't said a full sentence since the shot. She just hovered at the edge of the living room windows, clutching the scooter's handlebars like they were a lifeline. "I want to stay inside," she whispered. I nodded. "For as long as you need." But I stepped outside. I walked the full edge of my property line, one hand trailing, the border of pine stakes and invisible boundaries. My server's motion logs had recorded over 82 entries from the Braid side in the last month. Footsteps, yard equipment, once, a dog, all of it brushed against my daughter's safe zone. But no one saw that. All they saw was a dad with cameras. I reached the boundary marker, just a wide, flat stone nestled under two birch trees. The same one Maris and her mom used to sit on. It looked smaller now. The bark near it was scarred. I reached up and touched it, splintered. I measured the height from the ground. 4 feet, maybe 4.5. That's where the bullet had struck before deflecting into the brush. The thermal overlay had matched the impact precisely. I didn't need to theorize. I had it all logged, angle, energy, sound wave distribution. And still, I knew it wouldn't be enough, not yet. As I headed back, I saw someone across the street, standing half-shadowed behind a row of planter boxes, arms folded, head down. Ephraim Lott. He was our HOA treasurer, a structural engineer, quiet, precise, always voted with Cynthia, always seconded her motions. But right now, he looked like a man who couldn't breathe. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the spot where the tree bark split. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I didn't call out, just watched him for a second longer than I should have. When he noticed me, he stepped back behind the wall. The blinds twitched shut. I kept walking. I needed to know if anyone else had heard it. I started knocking, first on Hale Rios's door. He opened it without hesitation. "I heard it," he said, before I even asked. "Gunshot?" "Yeah," he said, "but it's alderwood. They'll say it was fireworks, or a leaf blower." I went door to door for 2 hours. Most said nothing. Some nodded and closed the door softly. Only one gave me something I could use, a timestamp. Devin had a motion camera in their baby monitor that caught the sound spike. I asked if I could have a copy. He nodded. "I'll transfer it." I thanked him and walked home. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger was loud and reckless. What I felt was colder, like solder cooling in a fuse line. When I got back, Maris was still in the same place by the window. She looked up at me like she wanted to ask something, but didn't know what the question was. "You're safe," I told her. She blinked. I wasn't sure she believed it. I wasn't sure I did either. Not until I could make Cynthia Braid's voice crack the way she cracked mine. Not until the judge leaned in and watched the moment my daughter ducked from a bullet no one else wanted to admit existed. And not until the entire neighborhood saw the playback, frame by frame. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the noise. Alderwood went quiet fast when it wanted to. No, I stayed awake because I couldn't stop replaying the footage. Every frame, every audio spike, the exact moment my daughter's head dipped as the round struck the tree above her. By morning, I had rendered a second version of the clip, cleaner, sharpened, the sound isolated, no embellishments, just fact. And I still hadn't heard a single word from Ephraim Lott. At 8:03 a.m., I stepped outside and crossed the street. His house was neat, clinical, brick exterior, hedges cut like diagrams. I could see him inside, just barely, moving through the kitchen with the slow, precise motions of a man who always measured twice. His blinds were halfway open. I raised my hand. He hesitated, then met me at the door. "Ephraim," I said quietly, "do you have a minute?" He glanced past me toward the street. "Cynthia won't want us talking." "I'm not interested in Cynthia." He swallowed. "It's not that simple." "I saw you," I said. "The moment it happened. You didn't look surprised." He opened the door wider, just enough to signal invitation. I stepped inside. The house smelled like dust and burnt coffee. A stack of blueprints sat on the counter, untouched. "I didn't think he'd actually pull the trigger," Ephraim said, voice brittle. "He's just volatile." Lenora said it was a starter pistol. He didn't answer. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The footage played on silent, just for a second. The thermal bloom, the recoil, the angle of Maris's silhouette flinching back. "That's not a starter pistol," I said. Ephraim's eyes dropped to the floor. "I know. So why say nothing?" He leaned against the counter, fingers curling against the edge. "She's the president, and she's already talking about suing you for defamation if this goes public. She called an emergency board meeting. Didn't invite you." "She doesn't need to sue me," I said. "Not if the county sees this first." His head snapped up. "You're going outside the HOA?" "Of course I am." There was a long silence. I let it stretch. "You know," he said finally, "I used to think Alderwood worked because we all played by the same rules. But somewhere along the line, the rules turned into a weapon. Now it's just her family's shield." "I'm not asking you to testify," I said. "I'm just asking if you saw the weapon." He nodded slowly. "Yes, a Ruger SR9. He keeps it in the garage safe, unlocked most days. She calls it protection against strays. But I've seen him wave it around when he's angry. That was enough." "Thank you." I turned to leave, but Ephraim stopped me. "She'll bury this if you don't act fast." "I plan to?" I walked back to my house and uploaded the new render into my forensic archive. I encrypted it, time-stamped it, watermarked the chain of custody metadata. Then I backed it up to an external drive. I didn't bother knocking on any more doors. I didn't need more silence. Maris was curled up in a blanket in the corner of the couch when I walked in. Her bowen face was pale, but she looked at me, really looked. Something in her expression told me she'd heard enough, even without words. I sat beside her. "This is going to end," I said, "and it's going to end the right way." She didn't nod, but she didn't look away either. I had the footage. I had Ephraim's quiet confirmation. I had the signatures, the timestamps, the full resolution thermal readouts. What I needed now was someone who wouldn't dismiss it just because it happened behind a picket fence. Not someone in Alderwood, someone above it. The email came at 9:17 a.m. No greeting, just the HOA letterhead, a reference number, and 2 new citations. 1. Violation of community surveillance restrictions, Article 4.7. 2. Endangerment via unauthorized equipment near minor residents. Both were stacked on top of the previous loitering complaint. It was their way of flipping the spotlight. The only name on the CC line was Lenora Braid, not even the rest of the board. The subject line read, "Notice of Escalation." I didn't reply. 15 minutes later, a bright blue sedan with the HOA logo on a magnetic door plate stopped near my mailbox. A man I didn't recognize got out, took a photo of my front-facing camera dome, and walked away without a word. By noon, the HOA's community app had pushed a new update. Residents are reminded that tampering with or deploying unregistered surveillance tech, including audio triggers, drone nodes, or thermal readers, is subject to fines and community compliance actions. No one mentioned the gun. I shut the app down and grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to let their manufactured noise bury what mattered. I needed to see the original texts, the rules they were using to bury me. Not what they posted in bulletins, but the actual HOA declarations, the architectural review guidelines, the board enforcement protocols. So, I drove to the HOA office, 2 miles outside Alderwood, tucked behind a bank complex like it was hiding from accountability. Inside, it smelled like old paper and fresh toner. A receptionist with coral lipstick raised an eyebrow when I gave my name. "I need to see the declarations," I said, "and the architectural rules. We have digital copies. I need the originals, date-signed copies, annotated if possible." She frowned. "We don't usually provide those to non-board members." "I was cited under Enforcement Code 4.7, I said, "and I've been told I'm violating minor safety protocol with my home's surveillance system. I want to see the basis for those claims." "I'll have to get the director." "Fine, I'll wait." She disappeared behind a frosted door. I stood in the middle of a too-quiet lobby while a muted TV cycled through HOA community events from last year. A pie baking contest, tree lighting, no one screaming, no one ducking from bullets. Finally, the door opened again and a man stepped out. Gray-haired, clean-shaven, glasses like magnifiers. His name tag read, Ellis Groman, Administrative Director. "You're Dorian Vale?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared again, then returned with a thick binder. He handed it over, then gestured to a small reading table against the far wall. "These are the most recent articles. Handwritten amendments are noted in red. Anything beyond 2018 is digitized." I opened it and flipped to 4.7. The clause was vague, intentionally so. Installation of recording equipment that captures private neighbor behavior or violates reasonable expectation of privacy may be subject to board review and removal. No definitions, no decibel limits, no guidance on what reasonable expectation meant. But the adjacent clause, 4.8, was worse. In cases involving surveillance that records children, HOA leadership may issue endangerment violations in collaboration with board authority. I checked the date. Red ink amendment, signed by Lenora Braid, March of last year. It had been added after an incident where her son had been caught trespassing by another neighbor's camera. That footage had been posted anonymously in a private forum and quickly deleted. Rumor was Jet had been vandalizing a mailbox. No charges had been filed. She had changed the rules to protect him. Now she was using those rules to target me. I closed the binder, handed it back, and thanked Ellis. "Be careful," he said as I turned to leave. "Of what?" He looked toward the door like someone might be listening. "Of the ground shifting under your feet. That board protects its own." I left without speaking. Outside, I sat in my car and opened the copy of the declaration I'd quietly photographed. My copy of the footage was ready. Ephraim's verbal confirmation was logged. And now I had the proof that Lenora had rewritten the HOA's enforcement language to shield her son, just months before he aimed a real weapon near my child's skull. If she wanted escalation, I'd show her what that actually looked like. By morning, the footage had been cleaned, time-coded, and passed through every verification filter I trusted. It was ready, not for HOA arbitration, but for something higher. Still, I wasn't going to throw it blindly into the system. I needed the right entry point, one that couldn't be quietly buried by a phone call from a well-connected board president. I drove 40 minutes outside Alderwood to a county government building tucked behind a veterans memorial. The parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, I requested an appointment with the Office of Public Safety Records, not law enforcement, yet. Just an official time-stamped filing to log my evidence into the government system. The kind of move that made it very hard for someone to make things disappear. They took my ID, scanned the USB drive, and logged it into their intake chain. I watched the clerk's brow furrow as she viewed the footage, on mute. "Is that a real firearm?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "A Ruger, 9mm. "And the child?" "My daughter." She looked up. "You'll be contacted by a district intake officer within 24 hours, possibly sooner." I thanked her and left. I drove in silence most of the way back. No music, no phone calls. I wanted the mental space clear. I kept seeing Maris's shoulders recoil in the thermal playback. Not flinch, not duck, recoil. It was the body's language for impact, not startle. I turned onto Alderwood's entrance road and nearly stopped short. A sign had gone up, freshly printed, staked just past the oak tree with the copper lights. Neighborhood meeting, resident safety, surveillance, and incident clarification. Date, tomorrow, time, 7:00 p.m., location, HOA Common Hall. Attendance strongly encouraged. Board led, no recordings permitted. So, that was the play. Cynthia was getting ahead of it. She didn't know I'd already handed over the footage to county records. I parked and walked up to my house, stopping just short of the porch steps. Ephraim Lott was standing there, stiff-backed, hands tucked behind him, like he wasn't sure if he was here to confess or fold. "I need to show you something," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. He pulled a folded slip of paper from his pocket and pushed it toward me. "This is the combination to the HOA fireproof cabinet in the board office," he said. "She keeps things in there, things not in digital logs." "Like what?" "The incident report from Jet's last firearm warning, 2 years ago." I looked up. "She buried it," he said. "Told the board it was a misunderstanding. But the original statement says otherwise. Why give this to me now?" He looked toward the hallway, where the faint sound of Maris's footsteps echoed upstairs. "Because I saw her face," he said. "And I knew if I stayed quiet again, I was choosing the wrong side of the story." I slid the paper toward me and tapped the digits into my phone to store them. "There's a meeting tomorrow," I said. "I know. She wants it to be a public reset. Call it a clarification." "It won't be," I said. I figured. As he left, I noticed his hands shaking. I waited until nightfall. Then I walked back into my office, sat at my rig, and opened the filing confirmation email from the county server, time-stamped. Download link verified. Encryption check passed. I clicked on the backup tab and mirrored the footage to a second server, this one offline, nested inside a drive hidden in a ceramic planter in the garage wall. Not because I was paranoid, because in communities like Alderwood, a paper trail was never enough. You needed redundancy, you needed pressure points. And now I had both, legal record and insider access. They were holding a meeting, but this time I wasn't coming to be silenced. Maris didn't ask why. I left again that night. She didn't ask anything. She sat on the couch with her blanket pulled up to her chin, the same cartoon movie looping on mute, the same pink mug untouched on the table beside her. Her silence had shape now. It pressed against the walls of the house, a quiet that didn't come from peace, but from shutdown. I kissed the top of her head, told her I'd be back before dark, and left without giving her the real reason. I didn't want to say evidence. I didn't want to say cabinet. I didn't want to say gun. The HOA office was closed to residents after 5, but I wasn't a resident tonight. I was just a contractor who happened to know the entry timer delay on the east side fire door. I parked around the back, walked up the mulch path, and stopped just beneath the motion light. It didn't trigger. I'd disabled it 3 days ago with a signal disruptor during a routine visit for system maintenance. They'd paid me to inspect their surveillance system. I hadn't told them I logged their blind spots too. I keyed in the combination Ephraim gave me, 52881. The door clicked, not loud, but definitive. Inside, the office smelled like recycled air and toner ink. I moved fast, past the reception desk, past the framed newsletter about HOA excellence, straight into the boardroom. The fireproof cabinet stood in the corner, half tucked beneath a wall-mounted thermostat. I opened it. Inside, a metal box of archived violation slips, a laminated emergency evacuation plan, and 2 slim folders bound with red tape. The one I needed was marked Incident LBR Jet. I opened it. A single-page report, dated 19 months ago. Initial complaint. Neighbor heard possible weapon discharge near the walking trail. Reporting resident, Alicia Mendez. She'd claimed Jet Braid had shouted something about target practice before firing into a cluster of leaves. Cynthia's handwritten note at the bottom read, "No video confirmation. Accusation appears retaliatory, close without board escalation." It had never been logged in the official database, but here it was, signed and sealed. I pulled out my phone, took a high-res scan, and uploaded it to my offline drive. Then I flipped the folder over. There was a second report, unsigned, partially redacted, printed in small font. It included the HOA's legal consultation memo from the time, recommend policy amendment to surveillance codes, limit recording of minors to reduce homeowner liability exposure. That's why Article 4.8 existed, not to protect privacy, to erase evidence, to preempt liability if the Braid boy did it again, which he had. And this time, my daughter had been in the line of fire. I closed the folder, resealed the cabinet, and exited the same way I came in. Every light remained dark behind me. The security system would reset in 40 seconds. I was back in my car by 25. I didn't drive home right away. I parked in the supermarket lot 2 blocks down and pulled out my laptop, connected to my mirrored drive, uploaded the report to the same server housing the video footage. Then I encrypted it, labeled it with the incident number, and time-stamped it against the metadata from Maris's scooter ride. Now, if anything happened to the physical copy, it wouldn't matter. It was already real, already logged. By the time I got home, Maris was asleep on the couch, knees curled to her chest. I lifted her gently, carried her to her bed, and pulled the blanket up around her. She didn't wake. I sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, listening to her breath, steady but fragile. They'd tried to bury what happened once, They weren't going to do it again. Because now I had more than footage. I had pattern, intent, suppression. Tomorrow, they'd hold their clarification meeting. And tomorrow, I'd make sure no one forgot what silence had cost my daughter. I arrived at the HOA Common Hall early, too early. The parking lot was mostly empty, but the interior lights were already on. Chairs lined up in neat rows, a podium at the front. Fresh printouts stacked on a folding table labeled Incident Clarification Meeting, Internal Use Only. They weren't wasting time. They were trying to control it. I sat near the back, 2 seats from the side door, and waited. I had the county intake confirmation printed in my inner jacket pocket, the cabinet report on a drive around my neck, and the footage backed up in 2 off-site locations. Nothing I needed to say tonight would come from memory. The room filled slowly. A few neighbors I recognized, Hale Rios, Noor, Devin. None of them made eye contact. Then came Curtis, the HOA vice chair. Then Ephraim. He entered like a man walking uphill, tie loose, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. He didn't sit at the board table. Instead, he took the seat next to mine. "I got your message," he said. "You sure about this?" "No," he admitted, "but I'm here." Cynthia Braid walked in last, clipboard under one arm, controlled expression locked in place. She stepped to the podium as if she were officiating a holiday event. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice smooth. "We know there's been concern following the events earlier this week involving the Vale household and alleged misconduct by a member of the Braid family. Tonight is not an inquisition. It's a clarification." I didn't move. The board has reviewed internal policy and would like to assure residents that safety remains our highest priority. However, misinformation has begun circulating, particularly involving a piece of selectively edited video footage, and we felt it best to address it directly. She paused, waiting for murmurs. They came right on cue. "Misinformation," she repeated, specifically the idea that a minor's actions, taken in privacy on his own property, were malicious in intent. She looked at me for the first time. Then Ephraim stood up. "Before we go further," he said, voice steady, "I need to disclose something." Cynthia stiffened. "Ephraim, this is board-led." "I know, but I'm the treasurer, and I'm also a witness." The room fell silent. He turned slightly to face the rows of neighbors. "I was present when the shot was fired. I saw the weapon. It was not a toy. It was not a starter pistol. It was a Ruger SR-9, discharged in the direction of the boundary marker." Someone gasped. Hale Rios sat up straighter. Ephraim didn't stop. "I also accessed the internal HOA file cabinet. I saw the prior report involving Jet Braid, an earlier discharge near a walking path. That report was signed and buried. It never made it into our digital logs." Cynthia's hands tightened around the edge of the podium. "You're violating executive record confidentiality." "I'm violating silence," he said. I stood now, slow, measured, the way I used to when briefing field agents before an extraction. "The footage isn't doctored," I said. "It's been reviewed by county intake officers. It includes thermal signature mapping, decibel spike tracking, and time-synced impact tracing, all of it admissible, all of it verified." Cynthia's voice sharpened. "You're not law enforcement." "No," I said. "But they are." I turned toward the door as it opened. A deputy stepped inside, badge displayed, clipboard in hand. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. "We're here to retrieve the submitted documentation and confirm access to any HOA safety files related to minor discharges," he said calmly. Cynthia took one half step back. I handed over the duplicate drive. "This is everything, including the original cabinet scan and amendment logs." The deputy nodded. "You'll be contacted soon for formal statements." Cynthia's voice cracked for the first time. "This is a private matter, a community matter." "It was," I said, "until someone fired near my child's head. Then it became a legal one." No one clapped, no one shouted, but no one defended her either. And for the first time since the shot, Maris's name hung in the room like a weight they could finally feel. The next morning came with an official call, not a knock, not a vague HOA notice, a direct ring from the County Child Endangerment Unit. They wanted to schedule a statement, on the record, in person. I gave them a time. When I hung up, I sat for a while in the silence of my office. The thermal footage played again on the screen beside me, muted. I didn't need to hear it anymore. The imagery alone had become part of me. Maris's head ducking, the scatter of bark from the tree, the pixelated flash of a muzzle no one wanted to admit had existed. I pulled open the center drawer of my desk. Inside was the secondary drive, mirror of the forensic data, cabinet reports, and HOA surveillance amendments. All time-stamped, hashed, and cross-referenced. I'd built it as a defensive record, but now it was the foundation of what came next. This wasn't just about pressing charges. It was about collapsing the wall Cynthia Braid had built to shield herself, her son, and the board's complicity. And I had the tools to do it. I opened my email client and crafted the first message. To Director Angela Rimes, Office of HOA Oversight and Civic Compliance, subject, Pattern of Safety, Code Suppression within Alderwood Crossings, HOA Attachments, Cabinet Scan.pdf, Ordinance Modifications, Log, Incident Footage Clean.mp4, County Intake Verification.pdf. I wrote clearly, professionally. I explained the buried report, the forged citation patterns, the misuse of Article 4.8, the legal conflict of interest between a sitting HOA president and an offending resident, in this case, her son. I used no emotional language, just law, timestamps, and suppressed history. Then I queued a second set of deliveries, one to a regional investigative journalist I trusted from my old cyber forensics cases, the other to the HOA's insurance underwriter, because a negligence claim tied to weapon discharge was about to hit their liability assessments harder than anything they'd budgeted for. By noon, Ephraim called. "She's trying to rally the rest of the board," he said. "To do what? Vote to censure me, retroactively disqualify the meeting because of board misalignment." "Doesn't matter," I said. "The county's already seen the footage." I thought that might be the case. He paused. "You're going to take her down, aren't you?" "No," I said. "The truth is going to do that. I'm just not letting her hide from it." There was a beat of quiet on the line, then a click as he hung up. I leaned back and watched the inbox light up. One read receipt, then another. Then a reply from Angela Rimes. "We've escalated your report. Preliminary injunction against HOA discretionary enforcement will be filed this week. Thank you for your documentation." I stared at that line for a long time. Not because I didn't expect it, but because something shifted in the air when authority finally acknowledged the breach. Later that afternoon, a white sedan pulled into my driveway. Not a patrol car, not HOA. It was Curtis, the vice chair. He got out slowly, his dress shirt rumpled, tie unknotted at the throat. He carried a small brown envelope. He didn't hand it to me. He set it down on the edge of my porch railing like it burned to touch. "I didn't know it went that far," he said. "She told us it was a toy." "Did you believe her?" He looked at me for the first time. "I didn't ask, I just let her talk." "Then you saw the footage?" He nodded. "I filed everything. You should know what's coming." He turned, nodded once, and walked back to his car. I picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside, a printed copy of Jet Braid's original violation. Summary, unsigned, but initialed by Curtis in the corner. It was dated a week before Cynthia pushed through Article 4.8. She'd started covering for him long before Maris ever sat on that rock. I went back inside and uploaded the new document to my server. That night, Maris fell asleep with the blanket pulled tighter than usual. But she didn't ask if we were safe. And for the first time in days, I didn't lie to myself when I said we were getting there. I didn't speak to anyone the morning of the county statement. I didn't need to rehearse it. Everything I had was already time-stamped, watermarked, verified. My job now wasn't to prove it happened. That part was done. My job was to make sure the record was permanent. I arrived at the Child Endangerment Division office 10 minutes early. No suit, no folder, just a small encrypted drive in my jacket pocket, my ID, and a name. Officer Lena Harrow. She met me in the interview room, professional, plain-spoken. No small talk. Just a nod and a signal to sit. "We've reviewed the footage and the amended HOA documents," she said, clicking a pen against her legal pad. "We need you to walk us through your daughter's presence at the site. Was she invited onto that property?" "She was sitting on a shared landmark between lots. It's been used by children for years," I answered. "Unmarked, undeclared, never restricted, until the shot." And the shooter? Jet Braid, 17, son of the HOA president. She paused. You're aware this could result in weapons charges. I'm not here to press a narrative, I said. Just to present what's already been ignored. She nodded. We'll request the HOA's full disciplinary records and the board's internal communications. If what you submitted matches what we're hearing elsewhere, the Oversight Division will likely step in. That's what I'd been preparing for all along. Not just a report, a trigger. By the time I returned home, a message was waiting on my machine. Not from the county, but from the HOA board. Emergency session, not in public, not at the community hall. A closed-door vote at 5 p.m. I knew what they were doing. They were going to try and strip Ephraim of his position, label him compromised, spin the narrative before it reached the broader neighborhood. Once he was out, they'd claim his testimony was retaliation, maybe even try to rewrite the minutes from the last meeting. But I was ready for that too. At 4:10, I returned to the binder I'd built, a private archive of every HOA meeting I'd attended in the last 2 years. Every audio file, every newsletter version saved and time-stamped on 3 different machines. I hadn't needed it before, but I did now. I uploaded the HOA's full voting roster to my drive, cross-referenced each board member's prior statements on safety policy, and queued the batch for county transfer under the subject line. Preemptive. Tampering, internal vote against whistleblower. Then I slipped a slim silver drive into an envelope, marked it with the county office's intake barcode, and walked it out to the courier van, already waiting. I'd scheduled the pickup 3 days ago, not because I had proof it would come to this, because I knew who I was dealing with. At 5:03, Ephraim called. They've moved to censure me, he said. Unanimous. Curtis abstained but didn't fight. Expected. They're preparing a public memo. Cynthia's calling it disciplinary reinforcement for breach of protocol. And the footage? She didn't mention it. She will, I said, when the insurance adjuster contacts her. Ephraim went quiet. You filed a claim? I didn't have to. Once the county flagged the child endangerment report, their liability exposure went active. Their policy requires them to disclose firearm incidents on community property or within visual range of shared use areas. He exhaled. God, she's going to lose her mind. She's going to lose more than that. I hung up, went to the backyard, and checked the server box wired into the shed. Still running, still logging, still feeding my off-site backup. Inside the house, Maris was curled up again. But she looked up when I walked in. Did something happen? She asked. I hesitated. Something important, I said. You'll understand it when you're older. She nodded slowly, and for the first time in days, she spoke again with full clarity. Did they listen? I knelt beside her, looked her in the eyes, and gave the only answer that mattered. They're about to. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp in courtroom B4 of the county municipal building. No audience, no press, just a formal petition review under Child Endangerment Statute 14.3. It wasn't a trial, not yet, but it was the kind of hearing that could tilt the ground before a judge ever reached for a gavel. I arrived early, alone. No attorney, no need. I wasn't the one under review. I was the one who documented what no one else dared admit. Inside, the room was clinical, soft lighting, 2 rows of benches, a long central table. The kind of space where decisions landed quietly but permanently. Judge Erwin Presnell sat at the bench, gray hair, dark eyes, not the type to bluff or perform. He didn't look at me when I entered. He was already reviewing the file. At 8:47, Lenora Braid walked in. No clipboard this time, just a thin folder, heels that struck too loud, and her son trailing behind her in a borrowed suit jacket that didn't quite fit his shoulders. Jet Braid didn't make eye contact. He kept his head down and his hands stuffed into his pockets. The bailiff called the room to order at exactly 9 p.m. Judge Presnell looked up once, eyes passing across the table, then down again. Let the record show, he began, that this hearing is convened at the request of the County Office of Public Safety, following receipt of verified forensic evidence documenting a firearm discharge near a minor. He paused, turned to me. Mr. Vale, please confirm that you are the legal guardian of the minor named Maris Vale and the provider of the submitted evidence. I am, I said. And the footage, acquired on your private surveillance system? Yes, Your Honor. FAA registered, geofenced to my property. triggered by decibel spike. He nodded. Then he turned to Lenora. Ms. Braid, your counsel did not appear. Are you representing yourself today? She sat straighter. Yes. This is a community misunderstanding, not a criminal matter. Presnell didn't react. He pressed a button on the console in front of him, and the lights dimmed slightly. A monitor on the wall came alive. There are 3 segments, he said. We'll begin with the moment of discharge. The footage rolled. There was no sound, only the thermal overlay. Mara sitting on the boundary stone, the sudden flash from behind the braid tool shed, the bark exploding above her head, and her form flinching hard before she scrambled out of frame. Jet stared at the screen like he didn't recognize himself. Cynthia watched with her jaw set. Presnell didn't pause the playback. The second segment began automatically. Audio waveforms synced with the footage, showing a measured spike at 117.3 decibels. Then a still frame capture of the muzzle bloom with a trace arc to the tree. The third segment showed the metadata chain, timestamps, device IDs, and the drive's verified hash. When the screen went dark again, Presnell folded his hands. Do you dispute the authenticity of this footage? He asked Lenora. I dispute its context, she said, voice tight. The child was on our side of the property line. She's been a repeated source of tension. My son reacted out of fear. Fear of a 10-year-old girl sitting on a rock? She's older than she looks. Presnell blinked. Is your son licensed to carry? No. Do you deny that the weapon used was a Ruger SR9? Silence. He clicked a pen against the desk once. Let the record reflect no response. The judge looked at Jet. Son, do you understand the consequences of discharging a firearm in proximity to a minor? Jet swallowed. I didn't think it would hit her. It didn't, I said quietly. But it came close enough that she hasn't stepped outside in days. Presnell held up a document. This is the prior suppressed incident from the HOA cabinet. You understand, Ms. Braid, that withholding this from authorities constitutes obstruction? She said nothing. Presnell turned toward the clerk. I'm authorizing an emergency injunction. The Braid family is to remove all firearms from the property pending full investigation. The HOA board will be referred to civic oversight for governance review, and the insurance carrier will be notified regarding risk exposure. He stood, fast, final. This court is adjourned. No one spoke as we left. Outside, the air felt thinner, lighter, like something toxic had been pulled out of the soil. The news broke before noon. A public bulletin posted to the Alderwood Crossings app, not by the board, but by the county oversight liaison. It was short, direct, formal. The Alderwood Crossings Homeowners Association is hereby placed under temporary administrative oversight, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into governance misconduct, suppression of safety violations, and retaliatory enforcement practices. Residents are advised that all citation activity is suspended until further notice. No HOA logo, no spin, just a seal and a signature. I stared at it in silence from my office chair. The message hung on the screen like a long-awaited obituary for a system that had protected the wrong people for far too long. 3 minutes later, my inbox lit up. Curtis. Subject line, Emergency Board Response, Statement Draft. I opened it, read the first 2 lines. While we deeply regret the confusion caused by recent events, we want to clarify that the actions taken by the board were always in service of resident safety. I didn't read the rest. There was no confusion, not anymore. At 2:13 p.m., a black SUV rolled into Alderwood with a county tag and an insurance audit team in the passenger seats. They didn't park at Cynthia's house. They parked at the HOA office. Within 15 minutes, a clipboard was taped to the glass door. Office closed until further notice. Do not remove. Neighbors began stepping outside, one by one. No panic, just quiet watching. A few of them looked at me when I emerged onto my front steps. No one spoke. Then someone clapped. Soft. One slow hit of palm to palm, then another joined, and another. It didn't swell into some cinematic standing ovation. That wasn't Alderwood's style, but it was real. It was acknowledgement. I walked across the lawn to the boundary marker. The stone looked different in the afternoon light, less like a memorial and more like a fault line that had finally split. Maris was inside, drawing. She hadn't asked about the hearing. She hadn't asked about Jet. But when I returned to the kitchen, she pointed to a picture she'd sketched in colored pencil. It was the two of us. She'd drawn the boundary stone between us, but she was smiling. And I wasn't looking at the rock. I was looking at her. "You weren't scared," she said quietly. I crouched next to her, rested my hand on the paper. "I was scared every second," I said. "But I didn't let that stop me." She looked at the drawing again. "Can we walk to it tomorrow?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, we can." At 5:47 p.m., Ephraim called one last time. "She's gone," he said. "Packed up. Moving back to her sister's place. The board's done. Curtis resigned. The treasurer. Roles being dissolved until reformation." I didn't say anything. "You were right," he added. "You didn't need to burn it down. Just make it impossible to lie." "People don't fear the truth," I said. "They fear how long it can sit in silence." That night, I removed the backup drives from my server, not because I didn't trust the system, but because the system finally moved faster than the silence. For once, I wasn't the only one logging the truth. Before bed, I checked on Maris one more time. She was asleep, the drawing still beside her pillow, fingers curled into the blanket like she'd finally exhaled. Outside, the neighborhood had changed, not in banners, not in speeches, but in who held the microphone. The morning after the injunction felt unreal in its simplicity. No HOA cars circling, no clipboard silhouettes staring from across the street, no new citations taped to my door before sunrise. Just quiet, the kind that didn't demand anything from us, didn't accuse, didn't monitor. Maris woke before I did. I found her standing at the living room window, her scooter already beside her, helmet in both hands. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't wavering. She was waiting. "Can we go now?" she asked. I didn't answer with words. I opened the door and let the cold morning air wash across her face. She stepped out first. We walked slowly toward the boundary marker, the same stretch of ground she hadn't crossed since the shot. Each footstep was its own small victory. Her grip tightened on my arm only once, when we passed the braid fence line. But we didn't stop. We didn't look back. The rock was still there, solid, unchanged, a place that had held our family long before someone tried to turn it into a battlefield. Maris touched it with her fingertips. Then she sat down, the same way she used to with her mother, knees tucked in, chin up, eyes scanning the trees like she expected the world to make sense again. "The judge believed you," she said softly. "The judge believed the truth," I answered. "And the truth doesn't disappear because someone hides it in a cabinet." She smiled. It was small, but it was a beginning. Across the street, a county worker hammered a temporary sign into the ground. "Administrative oversight in progress." Another sealed stack of HOA files was loaded into an audit van. None of it was dramatic. Accountability rarely is. It's quiet, procedural, inevitable, just like the way rot shows itself when the air finally shifts. By afternoon, the neighborhood had changed its rhythm. People were talking to each other again. Hale waved from his porch. Noor handed me a sealed container of food with a grateful nod. Devin asked if Maris wanted to join their daughter on a bike ride this weekend. For the first time in a long time, Alderwood didn't feel like a trap disguised as a community. It felt like a place waking up. Later, as the sun tilted low, I sat on the porch, while Maris rode slow circles around the driveway. Her laughter wasn't loud yet, but it was there, like a sound learning how to return. I took out the letter the county mailed that morning. Formal acknowledgement, case number, next steps, recommended protections. But the line that mattered most was simple. "Your documentation directly facilitated this review. Thank you for your thoroughness." I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and felt a weight inside me shift. Not gone, but lighter. What happened here wasn't just about a gunshot or an HOA president who thought she could rewrite accountability into whatever shape suited her. It was about what silence demands from those who survive it and what truth demands from those who break it open. Maris coasted back toward me and stopped her scooter at the foot of the steps. "Are we safe now?" she asked. I met her eyes, not with certainty, not with false comfort, just with the honesty she deserved. "We're safer than we were yesterday," I said, "and tomorrow will be safer than today. That's enough." She nodded, took my hand, and climbed onto the porch beside me. And for the first time since the shot, I felt the ground settle under us, not with fear, not with tension, but with the steady gravity of justice doing what it was meant to do. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.